Hey again, sorry about that abrupt change and transition to this new section of video. Believe it or not, since I last recorded this video a year or two ago, I had come into some new understandings that I wanted to include in this lecture and wanted to remove something that I felt might not be as accurate as when I first recorded it. So, starting at this point, I'm going to wrap up the rest of this section with this new slide, this new section here. We're discussing time from the New Testament perspective. It is really difficult because of the fact that our Western view of time is really all about what we would call chronos time. Now, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here in the slide you can see here. We talk about time, we refer to chronos time, time and divided up into seconds, into minutes, into hours, into days, into little boxes. And so anytime we hear the word time, we tend to read that, understand it, interpret it, and talk about it from the perspective of chronos time. But we need to be aware of the fact that the time in the New Testament, more often than not, is the word kairos. Kairos time, which refers to an opportune time, a moment, or a season. And so we need to be aware of the fact that our interpretation of even some Bible passages sometimes have been tainted by inserting our chronos understanding of time into the scriptures where they didn't intend chronos to be read. We know from reading through the stories from the Gospels that unplanned encounters were normative in Jesus' ministry. I've put just a few passages of scripture there. From the very beginning, you have him meeting with John the Baptist just by chance, meeting with disciples just by chance, meeting with Nicodemus by chance, meeting with the woman at the well. Now, okay, if you want to talk about the omniscience thing, okay, maybe he knew that all of these things were going to happen. So in fact, it was not a chance happening, maybe theologically, but when it comes to the way his ministry happened, he did not get up and check his watch first thing in the morning and say, oh, it's 6:15, I have to be at such and such by such and such time to meet with so-and-so. His life was based on kairos, the opportune moments, those opportune seasons and times, and that's how his ministry operated. And so, like I said, in the New Testament, when we're reading the New Testament, the only times that you see chronos is when they specifically talk about a time, at the third hour, at the ninth bell, at the end of the day. They talk about chronos only when it's a very specific thing that is happening at a specific time. Almost everywhere else, 86 times in the New Testament, the word that we might have in our Bibles that say time actually is the kairos time. And so once again, when Jesus warned his disciples to be aware of the time of the harvest in John 4:35, he was not talking about tick, 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 a moment in time. He was talking about a season. A harvest time was a season. It was a kairos. It was a moment in time. So he was talking about that as not a specific moment or a specific date, but as in a period of time when the harvest was available. When Paul stated, be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every time. Now, once again, in the King James Version, making use of the time, and some of the newer versions, it says making use of every opportunity because the days of evil are evil, in Ephesians 5:15-16. That moment, the newer interpretations, making most of every opportunity, better matches the idea of kairos. It is not that we have to, that is not a scriptural mandate to make sure that your digital calendar is always kept in order. It is not a digital mandate to make sure that you keep your meetings short. It is not a biblical mandate to make sure that we are getting the most out of every day. Don't waste 1 minute. God's given you 60 seconds and 60, everybody help, okay? Most of that style of preaching that we talk about, where we try to spiritualize our hypersensitivity to the passage of time, it's not what the Bible's talking about. The Bible is talking about making use of the opportunities, making use of the seasons, being aware of the moments in time when God is working in a person's life, when God is working in a community, when God is working in your life, and making use of those opportunities. So we can see that in reality, it is the Western view of time that has the hardest time, has the hardest challenge in coming into alignment with the scriptures. And so do be aware of that as we're walking with people, working with them. That is our view of time that is kind of more in conflict with the biblical view. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still, if I want a building built, I prefer people to be chronos thinkers. I don't want a bunch of kairos thinkers building my building and finishing it in 6 years. I want people who've got a schedule and follow that schedule and get things done. Okay, there still is a value, a good practical value to making use of time. So I'm not down talking it, but just do be aware of the fact that we have to be careful not to read it into places that it ought not be. And once again, there are variations in cultures. There's variations in cultures. This idea of being a single tract or monochronic culture, which is what the Western cultures are, and a polychronic or multi-tract view of time, which like the island of Yap, Korea, places like that are, those are extremes. And it is not as very, very few people live on the extremes. Most of us live somewhere out in the muddled middle. We're monochronic about one thing and polychronic about another. We're monochronic about how short we want meetings to be, but we're polychronic about how long we'll hang out with friends. And so this is not just a single thing that you can say, this person is this way. So be aware that there are variations in cultures. Interesting thought, and this is something that actually kind of it actually came from VeggieTales, and if you haven't watched VeggieTales, you need to go back and watch VeggieTales because it's a good theological background for many of my classes. Not really joking, sadly. But in the story, the VeggieTales story of the Good Samaritan, they have the two of the characters, the priest and the Levite. They actually have them go by, and then they sing a song about being busy, busy, dreadfully busy. You've no idea what I have to do. And they basically say that one of the reasons that the priest and the Levite walked by was they didn't have time for the guy. Now, they weren't chronos thinkers like we are, but to go over and help this guy would have made them late for whatever they were needing. Probably they were on their way for temple service of some sort. And once again, if they happened to touch him and he happened to be dead, they would be ceremonially unclean for up to a month and would not even get to do their temple service. So there was some element of time, of not wanting to waste time to help this guy, involved in the reason that they did not do what the Good Samaritan came and did. And an interesting thought here. The question, is time orientation a learned response or is it instinctive behavior? Don't really have to have an answer for that. I'm not going to ask you that in an exam or anything. The truth is, it's a good philosophical discussion that we could have sometime. In my opinion, it's mostly learned. But once it's been learned as a child, it becomes instinctive. Right now, I have a tendency, literally within me is an instinct for saving time. I am right now glancing up at the counter to see how long this video has gone. So right now in this moment, I have an instinct about making good use of time. But that instinct was built into me in my upbringing. So I would probably say, it's going to be a fun discussion to have, but it's probably a both and. It is learned, but it becomes instinctual after you've learned it so deeply. So interesting thoughts, and we will continue on our challenges about crossing cultures with the next video. Blessings.